think this is funny? You belong in jail. Let go of me. I'm not going anywhere.
She's completely insane.
The bank was so quiet you could hear the ticking of the wall clock over the soft hum of the AC. But every eye in that lobby was locked on one thing. A black woman standing in the middle of the polished tile floor, her hands shaking, rage and humiliation fighting for space on her face, while a white bank manager stood behind his glass desk, phone pressed to his ear. "I'm telling you," he said into the receiver, voice tight but smug, "she's becoming aggressive. I feel threatened. Yes, I'd like officers dispatched immediately." He glanced up at her like he'd already won. Like this was just another day his word would be taken over hers. "You know that look, right? That cold, casual confidence of someone who's never really paid for what they've done to people." The woman looked around, trying to decide what hurt more, the lie he just told, or the way the customers nearby were backing away slowly, whispering, like she was dangerous. "Sir," she said, her voice firm but trembling, "all I did was ask you to verify a check. That's it. You're lying." He turned his back to her, eyes on the frosted office window, pretending she wasn't even there. A few minutes later, the front doors slid open. 2 police officers stepped inside. You could feel the air leave the room. One of them scanned the lobby, his gaze landing on her, then on the manager, who raised his hand like he was calling a waiter at a restaurant. "That's her," the manager said. "She's been yelling, refusing to leave, making threats. My staff is intimidated. We've got customers here." The officer walked toward the woman. He said, hand resting on his belt, "I'm going to need you to calm down and step over here with me." She took a slow breath, then another. "Officer," she said carefully, "my name is Amora Johnson. I came here to cash a check. That is all. I have not yelled. I have not threatened anyone. This man just called 911 on me for existing." The manager scoffed. The officer's eyes flicked between them. Everyone in that room expected the same story they'd seen play out 100 times on their screens. What nobody in that bank lobby knew was that in just a few minutes, not only would Amora walk out of that building free and clear, but the man who had just called 911 on her? He'd be walking out with the banking future he'd always counted on, completely destroyed. And he'd be the one escorted to the door. If you're still with me, let's hit rewind. Because to understand how it got this bad, and how it all turned around so fast, you need to know who Amora was before that moment, and who that bank manager, Kyle, thought he was. Amora Johnson was not new to this. She was 35, with deep brown skin, locks pulled into a neat bun, and the kind of calm presence that made people feel like they could tell her their life story in a grocery store line. If you'd met her on any random day, you wouldn't guess the storms she'd survived. Single mom at 21. Laid off twice before 30. Credit ruined after a medical emergency for her daughter, Nia. And still, she had this stubborn belief in building something better, brick by brick, choice by choice. She worked as an independent HR consultant, helping small businesses clean up the internal mess they didn't know how to talk about. Hostile work environments. Discrimination. Retaliation. She'd sit at conference tables with owners who swore they didn't see color, then flinched the second she laid out their own data in front of them. She'd heard every excuse. Maybe they were just sensitive. We didn't mean it that way. We've always done it like this. Amora had learned to keep receipts. Emails, policies, dates, texts, everything. Not because she was paranoid. Because she was prepared. When you've lived long enough knowing you don't always get the benefit of the doubt, you learn that documentation isn't just paperwork. It's protection. That morning, Amora woke up in her small but cozy 2-bedroom apartment, sunlight creeping through the blinds, the city's noise just beginning to stretch awake outside. Her daughter, 14-year-old Nia, was at the kitchen table, textbook open, earbuds in, lips moving silently as she rehearsed lines for a school presentation. "Morning, baby," Amora said, kissing the top of her head. Nia blinked, pulled one earbud out, and smirked. "It's not morning. It's I'm already late the clock." Amora laughed. And whose fault is that? Racism, Nia deadpanned. Girl. I'm serious. If the system would just excuse black girls from first period. Finish your cereal, Amora said, but she was smiling. On the counter next to the fruit bowl sat an envelope. Amora had opened it the night before, staring at the numbers over and over, making sure she wasn't misreading. It was a check from a client she'd been working with for months, a mid-sized logistics company that had been hemorrhaging staff and quietly begging for help before a lawsuit hit. She'd overhauled their HR policy, trained managers, set up reporting channels, and navigated 3 messy investigations. They'd paid her a deposit up front. This was the final payment. A big one. Enough to pay off the rest of her lingering medical debt. Enough to give her some breathing room after years of walking on a financial tightrope. Enough that she'd allowed herself, just for a second, to imagine a weekend where she wasn't checking her bank app every day. You still staring at that check? Her best friend Ruth had asked over the phone last night. Ruth was in her late 50s, with a warm laugh and a voice like a church auntie who'd seen everything and lost patience for nonsense decades ago. Yes, Amora had admitted. I keep checking the numbers like they'll disappear. You earned that money, Ruth said. Don't you dare talk like it's charity. Cash that thing. Pay your bills. Buy yourself something nice. And please get a real coffee maker. That instant stuff is a hate crime. So now, standing there in the morning light, Amora picked up the check again. $25,000. From Veverline Logistics LLC to Samara L. Johnson in neat typed letters. She looked at it like it was both a victory and a fragile thing that could slip through her fingers. You ever had money so important that just holding it made you nervous? That's where she was. Her normal bank was a small local institution near her office. But today, she was heading to a branch of a larger bank closer to a client's building, just to get it done before a meeting. She'd looked up the bank, Riverstone Bank, checked their verification policies. Everything seemed straightforward. Walk in. Present ID. Let them verify the check. Walk out. That's all this was supposed to be. Meanwhile, across town, the man who would soon call the police on her was adjusting his tie in a glass office. Kyle Benson, 42, branch manager at Riverstone Bank, Cedar Heights location. He'd been with Riverstone for over 15 years. He had started as a teller right out of college, moved his way up, and he would tell anyone who listened about how he came from nothing, even though his nothing included parents who paid off his student loans and a grandfather who left him a down payment for his first condo. Still, in his mind, he'd earned this. He liked the sound of his title. Branch manager. He liked that the tellers jumped a little when he came out of his office. He liked that customers waited outside his door, hats in hand, when they wanted a fee waived or a loan reconsidered. He liked control. But lately? That control felt shaky. The bank's regional leadership had been talking about modernizing culture. There were memos about the diversity, equity, and inclusion. There were whispers about a new consulting firm the bank's top executives had brought in to evaluate internal practices. More eyes on managers. More questions about who was getting promoted. More analysis on why certain demographics of customers were closing their accounts. Kyle didn't say it out loud, but he hated it. Not because he thought he was a bad person. Because he thought he was a good one. He was proud of how professional he kept his branch. He liked traditional. He liked his regulars, Mr. Thompson, who came in to joke about his retirement, Mrs. Haynes, who brought cookies at Christmas. He didn't want to be told he needed to change. So when he saw the emails about the review, he rolled his eyes and deleted them after skimming. They're just checking boxes, he told his assistant manager, a younger guy named Ethan. This stuff will blow over like the last thing. You sure? Ethan had asked, watching him carefully. Trust me, Kyle said. I've been here long enough to know how this goes. That morning, the branch opened at 9 a.m. sharp. By 10:15, the lobby had a slow but steady flow of customers. People depositing paychecks, asking about fees, sitting in the chairs near the fake plants, checking their phones. Around 10:30, the front doors slid open and Amora walked in. She was dressed in a navy blazer, white blouse, dark jeans, and low heels. Professional, but comfortable. She walked with that mix of confidence and cautious awareness that many black women know too well, head held high, but senses tuned to every shift in the room. She walked up to a teller window where a young woman named Hannah was working. Hannah greeted her with a polite but practiced smile. "Good morning. Welcome to Riverstone Bank. How can I help you today?" "Good morning," Amora replied, sliding the check and her ID under the glass. "I'd like to cash this check, please. It's drawn from an account here." Hannah glanced at the check. Her eyes widened slightly at the amount. She tried not to react, but she was human. "Okay," Hannah said, typing something into her computer. "Let me just pull up the account." "One moment." Amora stood there, hands resting lightly on the counter. She didn't fidget. But her heart beat a little faster. Big checks did that. As Hannah typed, she frowned. The account pulled up. Balance, more than enough to cover the check. No red flags. No holds. She turned the check over, checked the signature. It matched previous signatures. Still, she hesitated. Because she could feel Kyle's gaze from across the lobby. He had a way of making his presence known without saying anything. It was like the room shifted around his opinions. "Is there a problem?" Amora asked gently, noticing the pause. "No," Hannah said quickly. "I just need my manager to approve this because of the amount. I'll be right back." She took the check and ID, swallowed, and walked toward Kyle's office. Kyle was at his desk, glancing through some reports, when Hannah knocked lightly on the open door. He looked up. "Yeah?" Kyle," she said, stepping in. "I've got a customer at window 3 with a check for $25,000. It's drawn on one of our business accounts. Everything looks okay, but I know we're supposed to get manager approval for anything over 10. He set his pen down. $25,000, he repeated, eyebrows raised. "Yeah. Who's the customer?" Hannah glanced back toward the lobby, where Amora was waiting. "Her name is Amora Johnson." "Does she have an account with us?" he asked. "No, she doesn't. She's just cashing." He leaned back. "Where's the check from?" "Everline Logistics. They've had an account here for years. No overdrafts, no warnings. And she just walked in with a $25,000 check to cash. No deposit." Hannah shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yeah. She wants it cashed. I mean, people do that sometimes, right?" Kyle sighed and stood. "Let me see it." She handed him the check and Amora's ID. He looked at the check. Then at the ID. His eyes narrowed just a fraction. You ever see someone make 1,000 assumptions from one glance? That was Kyle. He checked the address on her ID, noticed it wasn't from the wealthier part of town. He noticed she wasn't a regular. He noticed she was black. And his mind, steeped in years of subtle bias he refused to acknowledge, filled in the rest with fear, suspicion, and ego. "Did you call to verify with the business?" he asked. "No, not yet. I came to you first." He nodded. "Okay. We'll call. But something about this feels off." He didn't say why it felt off. He didn't say because she doesn't look like someone who usually walks in here with this much money. He didn't have to. It was in his tone. "I'll handle it," he said, slipping her ID and the check into a folder. "Stay at your window." Hannah nodded and went back, forcing a small smile at Amora. "My manager is just reviewing it," she said. "It'll be a few minutes." "No problem," Amora replied, though she felt a familiar tension tighten in her chest. She'd been here before. Not in this bank. But in rooms where her competence, her money, her very presence was treated like a question mark. She hated that she knew this script. Back in his office, Kyle dialed the number for Everline Logistics from the bank system. A man in accounting picked up. "This is Riverstone Bank, Cedar Heights branch," Kyle said. "We're calling to verify a check issued from your account. Do you have a moment?" "Sure," the man replied. Kyle read off the check number, amount, and recipient. "Yes," the man said. "That's legitimate. It's for our HR consultant, she just completed her contract with us." HR consultant, Kyle repeated, eyes flicking through the glass to the lobby. "You're good to go," the man said. "Let us know if you need anything else." "Thank you," Kyle said, and hung up. He sat there for a second. Everything checked out. But something in him didn't want to let it go. This was his branch. His rules. He got to decide what felt safe. So instead of walking out and approving the check, he opened a second system and ran her name through the bank's internal database. No flags. No fraud alerts. Nothing. He ran her ID number. Clean. He could have stopped there. He should have. But he didn't. He walked out to the lobby with the check and ID in his hand, his face arranged into a tight, professional expression. "Ms. Johnson," he said. She turned to face him. "Yes. I'm Kyle Benson, the branch manager here. I'd like to speak with you in my office for a moment about this transaction." People in line glanced up. Amora felt their eyes swing toward her. She hated that feeling. Like she was already a problem. But she also knew this game. Sometimes walking into an office meant less embarrassment. So she nodded. "Okay." She followed him to the glass-walled office, aware of every step. Inside, he gestured to a chair. She sat Saturday. He closed the door behind them, leaving the blinds half open, enough for people to see them. He sat across from her, folded his hands, and gave a tight smile. "So," he began, "you're looking to cash this check today?" "Yes," she said. "I verified with the issuing company that the funds are in the account. You can confirm that on your end too?" "We did," he said. "The account is in good standing." He paused. "But we have procedures and security protocols in place when it comes to large checks, especially when the customer doesn't have an existing relationship with our institution." "I understand," Amora replied calmly. "And I'm happy to follow any reasonable procedures. I have my ID, I can answer security questions. Whatever is needed." He exhaled through his nose. "This isn't personal, Ms. Johnson," he said, in the tone someone uses right before saying something very personal. "But we have to protect ourselves from potential fraud. People try to take advantage of banks like ours all the time." She tilted her head slightly. "Are you suggesting this check is fraudulent? Even after you confirmed it with the issuing company?" "I'm suggesting," he replied, "that there are inconsistencies that make it unusual." "What inconsistencies?" she asked. He hesitated. "You don't have an account with us. You're requesting to cash the full amount instead of depositing it. The issuing company is a corporate client, and we don't typically see checks of this size cashed by walk-in consultants. It raises questions. That's all." "Questions," she repeated slowly. "You live at this address?" he asked, tapping her ID. "Yes." "You work as an independent contractor?" "Yes." "What kind of work do you do?" "HR consulting." "Policy review." "Investigations." "Training," she said. "I help companies stop lawsuits before they happen." He gave a short, dry laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Right." That right was doing a lot of work. You know that sound? Not disbelief in the concept of what you do. Disbelief that you do it. Amora's jaw clenched, but she kept her voice even. "Is the problem my work, or something else?" He leaned back in his chair, choosing his words. Our system is set up to flag unusual activity, he said. When somebody who doesn't bank with us walks in with a large corporate check and wants cash, we have a right to be cautious. With all due respect, she said, your system didn't flag anything. You did. His eyes hardened. This isn't about you personally, he repeated. It feels pretty personal, she replied quietly. He frowned. At this point, he said, I'm not comfortable completing this transaction as requested. If you'd like to open an account with us, we can consider depositing the funds and placing a hold until they clear our internal review. How long is that hold? She asked. 7 to 10 business days. Maybe longer, depending on what we find. She stared at him. I have verification from the company. You confirm the funds. There are no flags on the account or on me. And you want to hold my money for 2 weeks because you're uncomfortable. His lips thinned. You're raising your voice, he said. Her voice hadn't actually risen. You know that move? When someone doesn't like the truth you're calmly stating, so they reframe you as emotional or aggressive. I'm not raising my voice, she said. I'm asking you to explain why you're treating a verified check as suspicious. I've explained our policy, he said. If you don't like it, you're free to go to your own bank. So you're refusing to cash it, she said. I'm refusing to put my branch at risk over a transaction I'm not comfortable with, he replied. We have to be careful. And honestly, your attitude right now isn't helping. There it was. The pivot from protocol to you're the problem. Amora felt heat rise in her chest. Years of microaggressions piled up in that one moment. She thought of the time a landlord lost her rental application until she called back with a lawyer CC on the email. The time a supervisor said, "You're so articulate," like it was a surprise. The countless times she'd walked into a store and had an employee hover a little too close. She quietly slid her phone out of her bag under the table and tapped the record button, placing its screen down on her lap. Okay, she said. Let's be very clear. Are you refusing to cash this check even though you've verified its legitimacy? Kyle didn't know he was being recorded. He just knew he was done being questioned. Yes, he said. I am refusing to cash it. And I'm asking you to leave the branch if you're not willing to follow our procedures. And those procedures, she asked, you apply them to everyone, or just people who look like me? His eyes flashed. You know what, he said, standing up abruptly. This conversation is over. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of discrimination because you don't get your way. He reached for the check and ID. I'll be holding on to this until we've completed an internal review. She stood too, faster than he expected. You're not holding my ID, she said. You can keep a copy, but you are legally required to give it back to me. He smirked. You can leave, Ms. Johnson. Or we can have security escort you out. There is no security here, she said, looking around at the open lobby behind the glass. There wasn't. Just a pair of older customers, a mom with a toddler, and the tellers. But he liked saying the word security. It implied force. Power. She reached for her ID and the check. He pulled back, clutching them to his chest. You need to calm down, he said loudly, so the tellers would hear. You're being aggressive. Her eyes widened. I haven't touched you, she said, voice still controlled. Give me my ID and my check back. Now. He opened his office door and raised his voice. I'm asking you to leave the premises, he said. You're making my staff uncomfortable. Heads turned. Phones paused mid-scroll. Hannah's face drained of color. She knew what she'd seen, a calm conversation, followed by her manager's ego spiraling. But what would her word weigh against his? Amora stepped out of the office into the lobby, her phone still recording in her hand now. Sir, she said, louder now so the room would hear, I am asking for you to return my ID and the verified check from a legitimate company. I have not raised my voice. I have not threatened you. I just want my property back so I can leave. Kyle straightened, feeling the eyes on him. In his mind, he saw risk everywhere. Lawsuit. Complaint. His name in some report. So he doubled down. Your behavior is escalating, he said, pulling his cell phone from his pocket. I'm calling the police. Hannah gasped softly. Kyle, she began. He ignored her. He dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The operator asked. Yes, he said, voice calm but urgent, this is the manager at Riverstone Bank in Cedar Heights. We have a woman here who is becoming aggressive and refusing to leave. She's causing a disturbance. I need officers dispatched. Amora stared at him, heart pounding. You lied, she said, more to herself than to him. You actually lied. If you're watching this and you've ever had someone weaponize 911 against you or someone you love, you already know. This isn't just a phone call. It's a threat. So that's how we got to the scene you saw at the beginning. Minutes later, 2 officers walked in, scanning the room, taking in the manager with the phone still in his hand, the black woman standing alone in the lobby, and the tense faces of everyone watching. Officers, Kyle said, stepping forward as if they'd come to save him personally. Thank you for coming. He pointed at Amora, has been yelling, refusing to leave, and making threats toward me and my staff. He spoke with the rehearsed calm tone people use when they want to sound like the only rational one in the room. Absolutely not, Amora said, shaking her head. The taller officer said, stepping closer to her, let's take a step over here and talk. She took a breath. I'm happy to talk, she said. And I'd like it on record that this man is lying. I have everything recorded from the moment he started refusing to give me my ID and my check back. You're recording? Kyle snapped. That's not allowed in here. Actually, Amora replied, it is. There's no expectation of privacy in a public lobby. Also, you called 911 on me, so yes, I'm recording. The officers exchanged a glance. Do you have any weapons on you? The second officer asked. No, she said immediately. I'm here to cash a check. That's it. Can I see the check? The first officer asked, turning to Kyle. Kyle hesitated. It's in my office, he said. I secured it when I felt there was a potential fraud attempt. You told the operator she was being aggressive and making threats, the officer said. Can you clarify exactly what she said, or did that made you feel threatened? Kyle blinked. She was confrontational, he said. She accused me of discrimination. She refused to leave when I asked. Did she threaten physical harm? The officer pressed. Well, not in so many words, but... So, no, the officer asked. Kyle's jaw tightened. I felt unsafe, he said through his teeth. I'm allowed to feel unsafe in my own branch. The officer turned back to Amora. What happened from your perspective? She lifted her phone. I have a recording of the entire interaction in his office, she said. From him confirming the check with the company, to him refusing to cash it for vague concerns, to him refusing to give me my ID back until I calmed down. I never threatened him. I asked specific questions about why he was treating my transaction differently. You're not allowed to record me. Kyle snapped again. The officer held up a hand. Sir, let us talk to her, he said. Kyle huffed, but stepped back. The officer turned to Amora fully. If you could email or text that recording to us, we can attach it to the report, he said. Gladly, Amora replied. But first, she added, louder now, I want my ID and my check back. The officer nodded and looked at Kyle. Sir, where are her documents? In my office, Kyle said stiffly. But I'm not sure we should release them until we've... Sir, the officer cut in, if you believe the check is fraudulent, that's a civil matter between the bank and the account holder. Right now, this is about the call you made. You said she was threatening you. If her documents are her property, you need to return them. Kyle opened his mouth, then closed it. He could feel something slipping. Control. He marched back to his office, grabbed the check and ID, and returned. "Here," he said, handing them to the officer rather than directly to Amora. The officer glanced at them, then passed them to her. "Thank you," she said quietly. The second officer said, "Do you want to leave or continue trying to complete this transaction?" She laughed bitterly. "What do you think?" The officers almost smiled. "If you're willing to step outside, we can finish taking your statement. Then you can decide what you want to do next." She nodded. "Sure." As Amora walked toward the door with the officers, Kyle called after them. "Are you just going to let her go?" he demanded. "She caused a disturbance in my branch. I want her trespassed. I don't want her coming back here." The first officer paused, turned slowly. "Sir," he said, "based on what we've seen so far, the only disturbance was a disagreement about bank policy. That's not a crime. If you want to file a formal trespass notice, you can do so. But you should know there will be a report about this call. If the facts don't match what you told the dispatcher." He let the sentence hang. Kyle swallowed. "Fine," he muttered. "Do whatever you have to do." As the doors closed behind Amora and the officers, a heavy silence settled in the lobby. Hannah looked down at her keyboard, heart pounding. She thought of saying something. She didn't. Not yet. Outside, in the parking lot, the officers stood with Amora near her car. The first officer said, tone much softer now, "I'm going to be honest with you. When we get a call from a bank manager saying someone is aggressive and refusing to leave, we have to respond like it could be a serious situation. That's how it's coded." "I know," she said. "Which is why what he did is so dangerous." "We agree," the second officer said carefully. There was a pause. "Would you like to press charges for filing a false report?" he asked. She blinked. "Is that an option?" she asked. "It can be," he replied. If someone knowingly exaggerates or lies to 911 to get a certain kind of response, especially when it could escalate into something harmful, that's a serious issue. We'd have to document everything. The recording would help. The witnesses would help. "I want to do more than just file a complaint," she said quietly. "I'm tired of people using the system as a weapon." The first officer nodded. "There are two parts here," he said. "You can file a complaint and ask that it be reviewed internally by our department and maybe the bank. Or, if there's more to this, if you believe this is part of a pattern or there's discrimination, you can take it higher. Attorney, corporate complaint, maybe even the regulators if it's that serious." Amora stared at the check in her hand. $25,000. A symbol of the work she did helping companies fix broken systems. What kind of hypocrite would she be if she let this slide without doing something? She felt her pulse steady. "Officer," she said, "would you mind giving me a copy of your incident report when it's ready?" "Of course," he said. "We can email it to you. Can we get your contact info?" She handed him a business card. He read it. His eyebrows went up. "HR and compliance consultant," he read aloud. "That's me," she said. He glanced at his partner, almost amused. "Okay, Ms. Johnson," he said. "We'll make sure the report is thorough." As they parted ways, the first officer paused. "Just for what it's worth," he added, "you handled that better than a lot of people would. If it were me, I'd be furious." "I am furious," she said. "I'm just tired of my fury being used against me." He nodded. "I get that. If you've ever been in a situation where you know you were wronged, and yet somehow you're the one trying to prove you're calm enough, reasonable enough, polite enough just to get basic respect. You already know what Amora felt driving away from that bank." Her hand shook on the steering wheel. Not from fear. From anger. She pulled into a nearby parking lot and sat there, breathing in and out. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Ruth. "Ruth. How'd it go?" Cash in hand yet or we still broke? Amora stared at the message. For a moment, she considered replying, all good, and just going about her day. But something inside her had snapped. Not in a reckless way. In a clarity way. You know that moment when something so blatant happens that your brain clicks from ignore it to no, we're not doing this anymore? She texted back. Amora. You won't believe what just happened. 2 minutes later, her phone was ringing. What did they do? Ruth's voice demanded as soon as Amora picked up. Amora recounted everything. The extra questions. The refusal. The 911 call. The officers. The whole time, Ruth was silent except for a few sharp inhales. Oh, baby, Ruth said finally. You okay? No, Amora said, and her voice wobbled for the first time. I'm really not. You at home? Ruth asked. No. I'm in a random parking lot, trying not to scream. Good, Ruth said. You sit there and scream if you need to. But you also hit record on your brain because we're not letting this slide. Amora sniffed. I have the whole conversation recorded, she said. His words, my words, the moment he refused to give me my ID back, all of it. Ruth let out a low whistle. Oh, he messed around and picked the wrong one today, she murmured. I just wanted to cash a check, Ruth, Amora said. I didn't go in there looking for a fight. Why is my existence a threat to that man? Because your existence reminds him he doesn't control everything, Ruth said. Men like that hate that feeling. There was a pause. Listen, Ruth added, I need you to remember something. You are not just some random customer with no power. Who are you? Amora sighed. Ruth. Say it, Ruth insisted. Amora closed her eyes. I'm an HR and compliance consultant, she recited dully. For who? Ruth pressed. For companies who are trying to not get sued or fined into the Stone Age, Amora said. And you know what kind of regulations banks live under, right? Ruth continued. They're drowning in compliance. They've probably got a whole department dedicated to making sure they don't get accused of exactly what that man just did. Slowly, Amora's anger shifted into something sharper. Purpose. Ruth, she said slowly, didn't you tell me Riverstone Bank was in the middle of some big internal review? Yes, Ruth said. The friend of my cousin, Sharon, works there in corporate. She said they hired some big independent firm to audit their branches. Something about customer treatment and discrimination complaints. Why? Amora's eyes opened. Because in that moment, a puzzle piece clicked into place. Send me Sharon's number, Amora said. Ruth didn't hesitate. Already on it, she said. And Amora. Yeah? Don't just end his day, Ruth said softly. End his pattern. Now, this is where the story shifts. Because earlier, we said, she ended his banking future in minutes. You might be thinking, that's dramatic. Careers don't end in minutes. But sometimes, all it takes is the right person, with the right receipts, talking to the right ears at exactly the wrong moment, for somebody else's game to be over. And that's exactly what was about to happen. While Amora cleaned her eyes with a tissue and straightened her blazer, somewhere on the top floor of Riverstone Bank's regional headquarters, a woman named Sharon Ortiz was nursing a headache. Sharon was the regional director of compliance, a Latina woman in her mid-40s who had learned to navigate the tightrope of corporate politics with precision. She'd been pushing for changes at Riverstone for years. Every time a complaint about discriminatory treatment at a branch crossed her desk, she'd highlight it, put it in presentations, send it up the ladder. Is this really a pattern? Senior executives would ask. Maybe these are just isolated incidents. She'd push back. I'm telling you, this is going to cost us if we don't get ahead of it. So when the bank finally brought in an external firm to audit their culture and practices, she'd almost cried with relief. Almost. She knew better than to cry at work. That morning, she had a meeting scheduled with that very firm. The lead consultant was supposed to join her in 20 minutes to go over preliminary findings from the first round of branch visits. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. But something told her to pick up. "This is Sharon," she said. "Hi, Sharon," a calm voice replied. "My name is Amora Johnson. I got your number from Ruth Ellison. She said you're the person at Riverstone Bank who actually cares when something goes wrong." Sharon straightened in her chair. "Ruth," she said. "Yes. I know her. What happened?" Amora took a breath. Then, clearly and calmly, she laid it out. The check. The verification. The refusal. The ID being held. The accusations of aggression. The 911 call. The officer's response. The mention of a recording. Sharon listened without interrupting. When Amora finished, there was a long pause. "I have the entire conversation recorded," Amora repeated. "I also have the business that issued the check who can confirm that your branch manager verified it and still refused to process it. And I have the incident number from the police report that's being filed as we speak." Sharon closed her eyes. Her headache sharpened. Which branch was this, she asked, though she already had a sinking feeling. "The Cedar Heights location," Amora replied. "This happened with the branch manager?" Sharon asked, voice tightening. "Yes," Amora said. "Kyle Benson, I think," she added, remembering the name on his nameplate. Sharon's eyes snapped open. She knew that name. She'd had his branch on her problem watch list for months. Little complaints that never quite rose to the level of formal discipline. Customers feeling unwelcome. Employees mentioning attitude changes when certain people walked in. Nothing bulletproof. Nothing she could slam on a table and say, "See." Until now. "Ms. Johnson," Sharon said quietly, "do you happen to be available in the next 30 minutes? Amora blinked. "I was supposed to meet a client," she said. "But I can reschedule." "Why?" "Because," Sharon said, "I am literally about to sit down with the external firm that is auditing our branches for exactly the kind of behavior you just described. And if you're willing, I would like you to be part of that conversation." Amora was silent for a moment. Then she said, "I'm willing." "Good," Sharon said. "I'll send you a video conference link. Do you have a laptop handy, or do you need to join from your phone?" "I'm 10 minutes from home," Amora said. "I can get there and join from my laptop." "Do that," Sharon said. "And Ms. Johnson?" "Yes?" "Thank you for not walking away from this," Sharon said softly. "I know that asking you to relive it is asking a lot. But I promise you, it won't be for nothing. If you're still watching, this is one of those moments I want you to really think about. How many times have people just walked away, telling themselves, it's not worth the energy? How many times have incidents like this never made it into a report, never made it into a meeting, never made it into the hands of someone with power to change something? Drop a comment if you've ever let something slide because you were tired, and tell me if you'd handle it differently after hearing this story. Amora drove home with purpose. By the time she sat down at her small desk, opened her laptop, and clicked the video link Sharon sent, the check was propped up next to her monitor like a reminder of why she was doing this. The screen flickered to life. On it, 3 faces appeared in little rectangles. Sharon. A middle-aged white man in a navy suit named Matthew, introduced as the lead consultant from the external audit firm. And another woman, a black woman with short hair and serious eyes, introduced as Lena, one of Matthew's senior partners. "Ms. Johnson," Sharon said, "thank you for joining us on such short notice. I'm Sharon, as we mentioned. This is Matthew and Lena from Fairside Consulting." "Nice to meet you," Amora said. "I wish it were under different circumstances." "Likewise," Matthew said, with the slightly uncomfortable expression of someone realizing they're stepping into the middle of something big. Lena, on the other hand, looked laser-focused. "I'm going to be upfront," Sharon said. "We are in the middle of a major review of customer experiences, particularly those involving potential discrimination. Your situation is not the first complaint we've heard about that branch. But it may be the clearest." Lena leaned forward. "Ms. Johnson, did you say you recorded the interaction with the branch manager?" she asked. "Yes," Amora said. "Audio only. I can share it securely." "Good," Lena said. "With your permission, we'd like to listen to it now, together. Then we can talk about next steps." Amora nodded. She uploaded the file through the secure link Matthew provided. They all went quiet as the audio played. They heard Kyle verify the check with Everline Logistics. They heard him question her work, her address, her purpose. They heard Amora's calm, steady voice asking for clarity. They heard his refusal. His threat to hold her ID. His accusation that she was raising her voice when she wasn't. They heard the moment he declared he was calling the police. Lena's jaw clenched. Sharon's cheeks burned with second-hand shame. When the audio ended, the silence on the call was heavy. Matthew cleared his throat. "Well," he said slowly, "if we were looking for a textbook example of how bias and power imbalance can escalate a standard transaction into something dangerous, we just found it." Lena nodded. "And he called 911, she said. "That's not just poor customer service. That's escalation with potential to cause real harm. And from my department's standpoint," Sharon added, "that's a major liability. Both ethically and legally." There was a pause. "Ms. Johnson," Matthew said, "I want to be clear, what you experienced was not okay. This isn't about customer satisfaction surveys. This is about misuse of authority and potential discrimination, possibly even violation of state laws regarding false reporting." "I'm not looking for an apology script," Amora said. "I'm not interested in a gift card, or a "we're sorry you felt that way" letter." "We understand," Lena said. "What do you want?" Amora looked at her. No one had asked her that yet. "What I want," she said slowly, choosing each word, "is for that man to never be in a position of power over customers like me again. I want there to be actual consequences, not just a slap on the wrist and a note in his file. I want your bank to tell him, clearly, that what he did was unacceptable and that using the police as customer service backup is not just a policy enforcement. It's dangerous. And I want you to review every incident in that branch where 911 has been called or where customers have complained about feeling profiled." She paused. "And I want you to know," she added, "that I am fully prepared to take this to social media, to the local news, and to the state banking regulators if this gets buried. I do this for a living. I help organizations clean this kind of thing up. So I know exactly how bad this looks for you if it comes out with no action taken." Matthew blinked. Sharon almost smiled. Lena's eyes lit up. "Do you currently have representation?" Lena asked. "I am representation," Amora said. "But I also have a friend who's a civil rights attorney. And I think she'd be very interested in this." Sharon leaned forward. "Ms. Johnson," she said, "I'm going to say something that might sound strange coming from someone in my position. But I'm glad you're not backing down. We need people like you to hold us accountable. And I need you to know that I am not going to let this get buried." She glanced at Matthew. "From a corporate standpoint," Sharon continued, "we have clear policies about non-discrimination and about appropriate use of emergency services. What he did today is, at minimum, grounds for serious disciplinary action. But given the context, previous complaints, ongoing audit, I believe we're beyond a discipline." "You're saying termination," Matthew said. "I'm saying more than termination," Sharon replied. "We need to flag him in our system so he can't just transfer to another branch and start again. We need to document this thoroughly for regulators. And we may need to self-report this before Ms. Johnson beats us to it." Lena nodded. "I'm in full agreement," she said. "From an external perspective, if this comes out without you having taken decisive action, it will look like Riverstone tolerates discriminatory practices. If you act swiftly and transparently, it could be a turning point instead. Matthew sighed. Okay, he said. What's our immediate action plan? And this is where things got very real for Kyle, very fast. Because remember how we said his banking future ended in minutes? Here's what those minutes looked like. While Kyle was back in his office at the Cedar Heights branch, grumbling to Ethan about entitled customers and people pulling the race card anytime they didn't get their way, his inbox pinged. He ignored it. Another ping. Then his desk phone rang. He picked it up. This is Kyle. Kyle, came the measured voice of his regional director, a man named Victor. I'm going to need you to join a video call in 5 minutes. I've sent the link to your email. I'm in the middle of managing the branch right now, Kyle said. Can it wait? No, Victor said. It cannot. There was something in his tone Kyle didn't like. A firmness he wasn't used to hearing directed at him. Okay, Kyle said slowly. Sure. He hung up, checked his email, and clicked the link. On screen, he saw Victor. He saw Sharon. He saw Matthew. He saw Lena. He didn't know any of the consultants, but he recognized Sharon from some training sessions. Good afternoon, he said cautiously. Kyle, Sharon said, voice clipped. Thank you for joining. What's this about? He asked. An incident that occurred at your branch less than an hour ago, Lena replied. With a customer named Amora Johnson. Kyle's stomach dropped. He tried to keep his face neutral. Yes, there was a situation, he said. A customer became agitated and combative when we couldn't process a large, suspicious check. I followed protocol and contacted law enforcement when she refused to leave. On Sharon's screen, Amora was off camera, but listening. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. They had agreed she would mute herself and only chime in if asked. Let's walk through your version, Lena said. Step by step. Kyle launched into his narrative. He described her walking in. The amount of the check. His concerns. He glossed over the confirmation call. He emphasized her accusations of discrimination. He described feeling unsafe. We work hard to maintain a professional environment, he concluded. I can't have customers coming in and making wild accusations about my integrity. Once she escalated, I had no choice but to call 911. He leaned back, convinced he'd sounded reasonable. Victor scratched his chin. Are you willing to put that in a written statement? Victor asked. Of course, Kyle said. Under penalty of termination if we find intentional misrepresentation. Sharon added. Kyle hesitated, just for a second. I'm telling the truth, he said defensively. I have nothing to hide. Lena nodded slowly. Good, she said. Because we've just listened to a full audio recording of your interaction with Ms. Johnson in your office. Kyle froze. What? He stammered. What you didn't know, Lena continued, is that she began recording the conversation after you questioned her work and refused to provide a clear reason for denying the transaction. We also spoke with the company that issued the check. They confirmed that you verified the check and that the funds were available. Well, Kyle began. And we are currently in contact with the responding officers, Sharon added. Their preliminary statement doesn't match what you just told us, either. The silence that followed felt like a drop off a cliff. Kyle, Victor said slowly, why did you tell 911 the customer was being aggressive and making threats when there is no evidence, audio or written, that she did either of those things? I felt threatened, Kyle said weakly. Is that not enough? Are my feelings not valid now? We're not talking about your feelings, Lena said, her voice cool. We're talking about facts. You called emergency services and escalated a routine transaction into a police matter, potentially putting a woman's life at risk because you were uncomfortable. Kyle's face flushed. You weren't there, he snapped. You don't know how these things escalate. We have to make judgment calls. If she had been a man, nobody would be questioning this. Except she wasn't a man, Lena said calmly. She was a black woman. And you invoked every stereotype in the book to justify calling the police on her. Aggressive. Threatening. Refused to leave. None of which is supported by what we've heard. He opened his mouth, but Sharon cut in. Kyle, she said, this is not the first complaint of this nature we've had about your branch. It is the first with this level of documentation. You are not just a teller making a mistake. You're the branch manager. You are a representative of this institution's values. And what you demonstrated today is the exact opposite of the culture we are trying to build. So what? Kyle retorted. You're going to fire me because one customer didn't like not getting her way and decided to cry discrimination. Sharon's eyes hardened. This isn't about one customer, she said. This is about a pattern. This is about liability. This is about trust. And this is about the fact that you lied to 911, to your staff, and just now, to us. Victor sighed heavily. Kyle, he said, effective immediately, you are suspended pending termination. You are not to return to the branch floor. You will be escorted out by security. Kyle's mouth fell open. You can't be serious, he said. Over this? I have been with this bank for 15 years. You're going to ruin my career because I tried to protect my branch. Your career, Matthew said quietly, is being impacted because you demonstrated poor judgment, abused your authority, and put both a customer and this institution at risk. That's not protecting the branch. That's endangering it. This is insane, Kyle said. Any lawyer will tell you I had the right to call 911 if I felt unsafe. Sharon leaned in. You're right, she said. You probably did have the legal right. But we're not just talking about legal today. We're talking about ethical. We're talking about reputational. And we're talking about regulatory. Because whether or not you see it as such, regulators are very interested in patterns of certain types of customers being treated as threats for no good reason. He swallowed. This isn't over, he said. On that, Lena replied, we agree. Victor spoke up again. Kyle, you will receive formal documentation shortly, he said. It will indicate that you were terminated for misconduct connected to discriminatory treatment and misuse of emergency services. This will be reflected in your employment record and any internal reference we provide going forward. I'd strongly advise you to consult with a lawyer before you attempt to pursue any further positions in banking. In other words, Kyle said hoarsely, you're blacklisting me. In other words, Sharon said, we are making sure you don't get to repeat this behavior somewhere else under our name. He stared at the screen, face twisted. Then he did something childish, he ended the call by closing his laptop without another word. It didn't matter. The decision was already made. Within minutes, a security guard was knocking on his office door. Mr. Benson, the guard said, I've been asked to escort you to collect your belongings. Employees watched as their branch manager walked through the lobby, face red, jaw clenched, while the guard hovered a step behind. He could feel their eyes on him. Just like Amora had. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't the one in control. Back on the video call, Sharon took a long breath and turned to Amora's window. Ms. Johnson, she said, are you still with us? I am, Amora said, appearing on camera again. Before we go any further, Sharon said, I want to say this plainly, I am sorry. Not sorry you felt that way. I am sorry that our employee abused his authority, that he called the police on you, and that he made you feel unsafe in a place where you should have been treated like any other customer. Thank you, Amora said quietly. That actually means something, coming from you. I also want you to know, Sharon continued, that as of a few minutes ago, he has been removed from his position. He will not be returning to that branch, and we are taking steps to ensure this is documented appropriately so he cannot return to banking under our institution with that behavior on his record. Amora blinked. Already, she asked. When you have audio evidence this clear, Lena said, you don't drag your feet. Not if you're serious. Amora exhaled. Some of the tension in her shoulders eased. Good, she said. We'd also like to offer to process your transaction in a way that doesn't require you to step foot in that branch again, Sharon said. If you're willing, I can personally coordinate with your own bank or arrange a remote deposit with expedited availability. Amora nodded slowly. I'd prefer that, she said. I don't feel safe going back there. Understood, Sharon said. We'll handle the logistics. Also, Ms. Johnson, I know you said earlier that you don't do this kind of work for free. And I fully respect that. But if you are open to it, I would like to discuss having you come on as an external consultant to review some of our internal policies and training. Amora's eyebrows rose. You're serious? She asked. Very, Sharon said. You have expertise we need. And lived experience we cannot afford to keep ignoring. Amora smiled faintly for the first time that day. I'd be open to that conversation, she said. But I'm still going to talk to my attorney about what happened to me specifically. As you should, Lena said. And if your attorney wants documentation from us, we will provide it. Matthew nodded. For what it's worth, he said, this is one of the clearest cases we've seen. If you choose to pursue legal action, I don't think you'll have trouble making your case. Amora nodded. Good to know, she said. Now, you might think the story ends there. Bank manager fired. Customer vindicated. Wrong made right. Roll credits. But real life is messier than that. This wasn't a perfect fairy tale. There were still fallout, conversations, and quiet moments of reflection on all sides. Let's fast forward a bit. 2 weeks later, the Cedar Heights branch had a new interim manager. Her name was Denise, a black woman in her early 30s who'd been an assistant manager at another branch and had a reputation for being fair and firm. The mood in the branch had shifted. Not overnight, but noticeably. One afternoon, Hannah and Ethan sat in the break room, drinking coffee. Do you think they overreacted? Ethan asked, referring to Kyle's termination. Hannah thought for a moment. I don't, she said. I saw the way he treated her. It wasn't about the check. He decided early on she was trouble and everything he did after that was about proving himself right. You think it was because she was black? Ethan asked. Hannah looked him in the eye. Yes, she said. Or at least, that was a part of it. If a white guy in a suit had walked in with that same check, it wouldn't have gone down like that. Ethan sighed. Sometimes I don't know what to do, he admitted. Like, I see stuff that doesn't sit right, but I don't want to get on Kyle's bad side. Or now, Denise's. I need this job. I get that, Hannah said. But I also think, thus saying nothing is part of why people like Kyle think they can get away with stuff. I should have spoken up when he started calling 911. I knew it felt wrong. Instead, I just stood there and watched. You were scared, Ethan said. We all were. Being scared doesn't erase the harm, Hannah said quietly. Later that week, Denise held a staff meeting. They gathered in the small lobby after closing. I'm not going to pretend nothing happened, Denise said, standing near the teller line. You all know why Kyle's not here. I'm not here to gossip about him. But I am here to say this, if anyone in this branch ever calls 911 on a customer again, it will only be because there is a clear, immediate threat to physical safety. Not because we're uncomfortable. Not because someone asked questions. Not because someone is black or brown and dared to be assertive. Understood. They nodded. And if you see something that feels wrong, she added, I expect you to say something. You can come to me. You can go to HR. You can use the anonymous hotline. But silence is not neutral. It's consent. Hannah felt a lump in her throat. After the meeting, she approached Denise. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure, Denise replied. Do you know what's going to happen to that customer? Hannah asked. The one Kyle called 911 on. Denise smiled softly. Last I heard, she said, she's doing some work with corporate. And from what Sharon told me, she's making sure what happened to her changes things for customers going forward. Hannah nodded slowly. That's good, she said. Meanwhile, in a small office somewhere across town, Amora sat across from her attorney, a woman named Jasmine. Jasmine flipped through a folder containing printouts of emails, the audio transcript, the police report, and the bank's written acknowledgement of misconduct. You've got a very strong case, Jasmine said. If we file a complaint, we can probably settle quickly. They're going to want to avoid this going to court. I'm less interested in the money, Amora said. Spoken like someone who won a settlement already in her head, Jasmine replied with a smirk. But I get it. For what it's worth, we can negotiate terms that include policy changes, public acknowledgement, and maybe even structured oversight. Amora nodded. I already have a contract with them as a consultant, she said. Sharon made sure they paid my rate. We're reviewing their anti-discrimination training, their use of force and 911 call policies, and their internal complaint handling. I want to tie any settlement to measurable changes. Jasmine smiled. You're dangerous, she said. In the best way. I just don't want this to end with one guy getting fired and the system staying the same, Amora said. Because you and I both know, if the culture doesn't change, there will be another Kyle in another branch doing the same thing to someone else. Jasmine leaned back. You know, she said casually, you could do this full time. Compliance, legal strategy, systemic reform. You've already got the brains for it. Amora laughed softly. I am doing it full time, she said. This is just more personal now. She glanced at the check on the table between them. It had long since been deposited. The money was in her account. She'd paid off the medical debt. Bought Nia a new laptop for school. Even gotten that fancy coffee maker Ruth kept nagging her about. But the check meant more now. It wasn't just money. It was a marker. The day she refused to let someone use a system against her anymore. And what about Kyle? Well, let's check in on him. A few months after his termination, he sat across from a recruiter in a small office. His suit looked a little more worn. His eyes had the weary, defensive look of someone who'd been telling the same half-truth story over and over. So, the recruiter said, glancing at his resume, you were with Riverstone Bank for 15 years, ending as a branch manager. Impressive. But I see there's an abrupt end date about 3 months ago. Can you tell me what happened? Kyle forced a tight smile. I had a disagreement with upper management about how to handle a difficult customer situation, he said. They felt I should have done things differently. We mutually agreed to part ways. The recruiter clicked on something on her screen. Well, she said slowly, we did request an internal reference from Riverstone. And I have to be honest, they characterized your departure as termination for misconduct related to discriminatory behavior and misuse of emergency services. His face flushed. That's exaggeration, he said quickly. They're covering there. The report also mentioned a recorded incident involving a black female customer and a 911 call, she said calmly. We take that very seriously here. Especially given the current climate and our own commitments. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The recruiter gave him a polite but firm look. At this time, she said, I don't think we can proceed with placing you in any client-facing or managerial banking role. We have to consider the risk. So that's it, he asked. One incident and my whole career is over. One documented incident, she corrected, and a pattern of concerns flagged by your previous organization. I'm sorry, Mr. Benson. I wish you the best, but I can't ignore this. He left the office feeling like the world had turned against him. He complained to friends. He ranted online, in closed groups, about overcorrection and witch hunts and how you can't do your job as a white man anymore without someone crying racism. But the opportunities didn't come. The banking doors that had once opened easily for him now stayed shut. He eventually took a job in a completely different sector, with less authority, less prestige, and far less pay. Was that enough to balance the scales? No. Because no job loss can erase the risk he put Amora in with that one phone call. But accountability doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. For the first time, there were real consequences. And he had to live with them. A year later, Amora stood at a small podium in a hotel conference room, speaking to a group of business owners and HR professionals. The slide behind her read, "When policy meets power, turning performative diversity into real protection." "I want to tell you a story," she began, looking out at the faces in front of her. About a check, a bank, and a phone call that could have gone very differently. She told them the story, not with every detail, but enough. The questions. The refusal. The 911 call. The officers. The corporate call. The termination. And then she asked the room, "How many of you have policies that say you don't discriminate, but no systems to check whether your people actually live those values on the ground?" Hands shifted uncomfortably. Heads tilted. That bank had a beautiful diversity statement, she continued. They had posters. Training modules. All the things that look good in a brochure. But in the moment of truth, the only thing that mattered was what one man with authority decided to do with his feelings and his power. She paused. Policies don't protect people if the people enforcing them aren't held accountable. And marginalized customers, black customers, brown customers, disabled customers, trans customers, pay the price for that gap every day. She glanced at the front row, where Sharon sat, listening intently. "Here's the good news," Amora added. "When we finally treat these incidents as systemic failures instead of one-off PR crises, we can make real changes." That same bank now has strict guidelines about when staff can call 911. They have mandatory training, not just on bias, but on de-escalation and alternative paths. They track complaints by location and type and actually do something with that data. They have diverse staff in decision-making roles, not just in entry-level positions. She smiled faintly. And they paid a very competent consultant to help them get there, she added, to a ripple of laughter. If you're still watching this video, she'd say if she were talking directly to you through the screen, "I want you to think about something, in whatever spaces you move through, your job, your school, your business. Are you Kyle, ignoring the impact of your comfort? Are you Hannah, seeing something wrong and saying nothing? Are you Sharon, fighting for change inside a system that's slow to listen? Or are you like Amora, refusing to let someone else's misuse of power define your story?" Back in the conference room, she wrapped up her speech. "Here's the final point," she said. "Accountability isn't about revenge. It's about interruption. You may not be able to change a person's heart. But you can absolutely change what they're allowed to do with their power. That day at the bank, I didn't just want an apology. I wanted an interruption. And that's what we created." She stepped away from the podium to applause. Afterward, as people lined up to talk to her, a young black woman with braids and a nervous smile approached. "Ms. Johnson," she said, voice trembling slightly. "I work at a bank. And hearing your story, I've seen some stuff. Stuff that didn't sit right. I didn't know I could do anything about it." "You can," Amora said gently. "You can document. You can report. You can build alliances with people like Sharon in your organization. And if all else fails, you can leave and take your talent somewhere that doesn't ask you to be complicit." The young woman nodded, eyes shining. "Thank you," she whispered. Later that night, back home, Amora sat on the couch with Nia, who was now taller, more opinionated, and still mercilessly honest. "You really turned that man's life upside down," Nia said, scrolling through her phone where an article about Riverstone's new policies was trending. "No," Amora said thoughtfully. "He turned his own life upside down. I just made sure the consequences caught up to him." Nia smirked. "Still kind of a power move, Mom." Amora laughed. "Maybe a little. Nia got serious. Were you scared? She asked. Like, that day. When he called the cops on you. Yes, Amara said honestly. I was scared. For myself. For you. For what could happen if the wrong person walked through that door with the wrong assumptions? So why didn't you just walk away? Nia asked. A lot of people would have. I've walked away before, Amara said softly. So many times. Because I was tired. Because I didn't want to be that person. Because it felt safer. But that day? Something in me said, if you let this go, you're telling him, and everyone like him, that they can do this forever. And I couldn't live with that. She looked at her daughter. I want you to grow up in a world where being black and asking for your money doesn't come with the risk of gun barrels and handcuffs, she said. I can't fix the whole world. But I can fight my piece of it. Nia leaned her head on her mom's shoulder. I'm glad you did, she murmured. So here's where we land. What happens when a bank manager calls 911 on a black woman who just wanted to cash a check? If the story stops there, it's just another statistic. Another headline. Another trauma replayed. But when that woman refuses to back down, uses her skills, her receipts, and her voice. When people inside the system, like Sharon, stand with her instead of closing ranks. When there are real consequences, not just PR spin. Then one man's bad decision becomes a turning point instead of just another wound. If you're still here at the end of this story, I want to leave you with a few questions. If you were in that bank lobby, what would you have done? Stayed silent? Spoken up? In your own life, where have you seen power used like a weapon instead of a responsibility? And when you're the one holding power, even just a little, what would it look like to choose accountability over ego? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in Amara's shoes, or in Hannah's, or even in Sharon's. And if you believe people should be held accountable for how they use systems like 911, hit that like button so more folks see this story. Subscribe for more real lifestyle stories like this, stories that aren't just about drama, but about what we do with it. Because at the end of the day, the difference between a story that breaks us and a story that builds us is what we choose to do next.